Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to be in front of you today talking about the effects of climate change on floods and flood analysis. Before going through this, it's maybe good to know about our hydrological characteristics so we can notice if there is any change happening and on that and the climate. The temperature usually in arid areas is mostly very high, and if we talk about Oman, it can rise up to 45 degrees centigrade in some parts of summers, and we know in some countries it can reach above 50 also. There is no clear seasons. We have mostly summer and winter, we don't know a lot about, or we don't experience these springs and autumn a lot. But we have in Oman that in the south, Al-Kharif season, which is from June to August, where that area or that part of our country is affected by the monsoon. The average annual rainfall ranges in Oman from 50 millimeter to 350, with high temporal and spatial variability. That's why we have to be very careful when we talk about one figure, when we talk about the average rainfall, because it can be misleading because of that. The rainfall is difficult to be predicted. It's very intense, happens in very short time, and extremely variable in space and time, leading to flash floods. We noticed that our wadi channels or our water channels are usually dry. We call it wadis until there is very heavy rainfall, and then we will see the flash floods. There are no clear wadi channels except in the upstream and downstream. It might be difficult to note because to notice that, because they distributed all over the coast. If it ends into the sea, or it ends to the deserts, and that makes assessing the floods in these areas or downstream sometimes can be very difficult, or even determining the catchment area, because it might change from one event to another. We have flash floods with very high velocity, and the flood peaks can be above 10,000 cubic meter per second, and that's why the damage can be very, very high during these severe floods. There's absence of base flow, sparsity of plant cover, and something very important to know about arid is the high transmission losses. So the flood can decrease instead of increasing, like in the humid areas. Unless there's a cyclone or the rainfall is evenly distributed on the whole catchment, which is not happening very frequent. The losses are very high, so we can see that the evaporation and the evaporation initial losses are very high, and we need to consider that in modeling and hydrological analysis. Before going to talk about the climate change effects, it's good to know what is the climate change. Here, I brought this definition of the United Nations. The United Nations defines the climate change as it refers to long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns. The shifts may be natural, but since the 1800s, human activities have been main driver of climate change, primarily due to the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas, which produces heat-trapping gases. Of course, I don't think that the only factors affecting the climate change. There are many other factors besides the fossil fuels. Of course, we need to consider if we need to control this climate change. What are the effects of climate change? Of course, hotter temperature, which everybody noticed, and that affects, of course, um, uh, the other um, factors in climate. So, like the rainfall patterns and so on. More severe storms, as we noticed that in our countries and other parts of the world. So the rainfall pattern becoming different and more severe. Floods are noticed. Increased droughts. So we have more severe storms and in some parts, and more severe droughts in other parts of the world. And we know the effects also of that on water resources, on agriculture, and on people's settlement and food security. The increase in water levels of oceans and sea, and that affects a lot of coastal areas, and it was predicted that some of the islands might disappear or will be disappear in next future decades. Warming, rising ocean, and loss of species. Loss of because of the temperature increasing, weather are affected. Of course, some species won't be able to live under the new circumstances. There's not enough food because, of course, there are more floods destroying farms, and there are more droughts, which also affect the agriculture. And more health risks. So the weather patterns could expand some diseases, and also and the diseases can increase the number of deaths because of them. The poverty and displacement also increased because a lot of people might lose their houses and properties because of floods, and the droughts also affecting the farmers, and affecting also affecting the jobs, the people, because of the high temperature. They cannot work always outdoor jobs sometimes. So that all leads to more poverty, besides, of course, that floods can destroy the whole cities. There are many types of floods, like flash floods, coastal floods, urban floods, river floods, ponding, but we are concentrating on flash floods because our areas are affected more by flash floods, and some of that has been mentioned already. Environmentally, it can cause water contamination, loss of local species, significant impacts on biodiversity. Seagrass and coral communities are affected along the coast. Erosion, and then the sediment also affects the environment. There are social impacts because many people and animals can die or get injured because of floods and can lose their homes. Water supply and electricity can be affected. Flooding brings a lot of diseases, and also insects and snakes can be there. A very important thing is the economy can be affected because infrastructure can be affected badly by floods, and you can see that we saw that in Jeddah, and also we saw that in Oman, and a lot of people lose their properties. So that all affects the economic, of course. There are also, if talking about negative effects of floods, but we have to remember there are some flood positive impacts, like floods help spreading organic materials, nutrients, sediments, which is good for agriculture, and very important, increasing the water level for groundwater and surface water into, and it's have positive impacts on wetlands and the species living there. Talking about Oman, that Oman is always exposed to severe floods and tropical cyclones because of its location. So in 1890, there was big flood, 27, 48, 51, 59, 77, 82, 2002, then the known famous Gono in 2007, 2010, 11, 15, 18, 18, 19, 20. So we can see that in the last decade, the floods, severe floods are more frequent. This table shows that it's not only more frequent cyclones, we are having the magnitude of rainfall increased. So if we see what is recorded in 1890 flood, compared to the other floods, recent floods, we will see that it was 286 maximum rain recorded. But of course, we didn't have at the time a good network, monitoring network to record all areas. You can see that in 2007 it was over 700, 2010 over 500, 2011 over 700, 2018 over 600, 2020 552, 2021 465. So the magnitudes are increasing, as we can see. If we talk about flood magnitudes, the flood magnitudes increase. Also, the record shows that the flood peaks are increasing. So we can see in 81 4,700, that's very severe cyclone hit Oman, but in 97 it was over 4,000. In 2007, Gono over 8,000 cubic meter per second. Fit was over 2,000. We have Makono 2018 over 4,000, and then we have Shaheen, which is over 3,000 in 2021. So the flood magnitudes are increasing, and that is causing a lot of damage in the area also. Hence, the flood management is very, very important, and the flood risk control. What is that requires? Understanding flood characteristics, because you cannot put plans if you don't understand your flood characteristics, what exactly happening and why it's happening and how it's happening. Providing flood frequency for water development locations, producing flood risk zone maps to know where to build, where we shouldn't build, and where you have to be careful if you build. Forming a hydrological basis for evaluating and controlling current and future development in these flood risk maps based on high, medium, low risk zones, providing initial information for planning, flood control, and city planning also. Development of guidelines and standards, also very, very important. To do that, of course, you need to do rainfall frequency, flood frequency. You have to do rainfall runoff relationships analysis, and to also know and assess the losses. Flood frequency analysis are very, very important because the rapid development needs improvement of floodplain planning and management. Providing information for progression to the floodplain management, for determination and implementation of flood control and mitigative measures in flood-prone areas. Also to protect the existing and future areas by building flood protection schemes, assessing regional flood characteristics, and making standardized approach desirable, because you cannot just give the different companies different areas and they select whatever they want. If you do frequency analysis for whole nations, you will have better understanding and can provide also the frequency analysis frequency for different design floods for any areas you want to have a project in it. This is the first flood frequency curve was done, general curve for Oman, based on very few data at the time in 1991. And everybody thought at that time it's overestimating the flood peaks, and it shouldn't be used. We should use less and all that stuff. And those are the flood maps. This is an example of flood risk map. Was carried out at that time in early 90s for the major cities in Oman. So, and it shows that the high risk zones, which are in red color, and that's for floods occurring from 1 to 5 years. The blue, that is medium risk zone. For floods occurring from 6 to 20 years, and then low risk zones for above 21 year, and that's shown in yellow. Of course, that should be used in planning cities, and unfortunately, it hasn't been used by all the planners, developers, and that's why now a lot of development was carried out in red zones, which caused or increased the flood damage because the water channels or wadi channels has been blocked by development. This figures shows that effects of severe floods on frequency analysis, and why it's very important to update all these frequency analysis, and then of course, if we are carrying out any projects, that flood designs will be affected. So we can see that this from 15 minutes rainfall frequencies to 24 rainfall frequency with Gono and without Gono. With Gono with the blue line, and without Gono with the green line. And we can see how Gono, including Gono, increase the flood for different return periods. This is shows that the magnitudes of different rainfall, different rainfall amounts for different period of records, for short from 15 minutes to 24 minutes, and it shows that with Gono, 50 years, for example, for 24 hours is 151. With Gono, it's over 200. It's over 300 actually. This is in the right table is the general, the old one for all of Oman, and it shows, of course, much less magnitudes for different return periods. Here, this table shows different floods magnitudes, flood peaks for different period of records: 72 to 2006, 72 to 2007, 72 to 2010. 2007 with Gono, 2010 with including FIT also, and the table shows very clearly the flood magnitudes for different return periods are increasing, which means it's very important to update our flood frequencies so we can use more reliable design floods for different infrastructures to protect them properly. And consider the climate change effects. This one shows that flood frequency analysis for Wadi Hajar, and it shows very clear that the effect uh, of uh, of Gono, including and excluding, is very high. If, so it's very important to update our frequency analysis and include the severe floods. This is shows Wadi Bani Umar, and again it shows for this. The table shows the different values for so for different periods up to 2010, 2014, and 2021 for the last decades. And it shows, of course, how it's increasing, how updating the flood frequency increases the flood magnitude for different return periods. Once we talked about that, it's very important then to understand that the integrated flood management is very important. So you cannot sort one problem and ignore the others, or only think about protection without thinking about uh, all the other sectors and areas affected by that. So for proper flood management, you need to have land use management, you have to water resources management, you have to have risk management. The floodplain management is prevention. We should have prevention activities and environmental activities. So that is usually before before the flood happens. Then once the flood happens, you need to have proper response activities. And after the flood or severe flood happens, then you need recovery activities. And because of the time consideration, time limits, I cannot go through all these activities in details, but you need to do in prevention activities. There are many different things supposed to be done. In environmental activities, there are many other things needs to be carried out, and then the recovery. As a conclusion, is I will conclude my presentation with that climate change has great effects on different aspects of life. It also affects the flood patterns and frequency. Flood studies and management should consider all these changes when carrying out any study or protection schemes. Also, as the flood has great effects on different aspects of life and environment, integrated flood management is essential. Flood management should include floodplain management, prevention activities, should include response activities and recovery activities. Also, there should be certain strategies to reduce physical hazard, the exposure to the hazard, and the vulnerability to the hazard, considering the climate change effects, as I showed some the examples about how the hydrological analysis, frequency analysis are affected. So the design floods are affected. We need to consider the climate change to take the right actions and protection, and design the right protection schemes also. Flood studies and hydrological analysis is very important for better understanding the hydrology of any region, and based on that, selecting the suitable design floods and suitable models, suitable methods. Also, the update of hydrological analysis and the flood frequency analysis are very important, as these results can affect the design floods for different return periods, for different schemes. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.